Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll think it's fate.
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, brought to you by Modern Well, a beautiful woman-centered collaborative workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm your host, April Seifert, psychologist, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed life experience junkie. Each week, I will introduce you to a different woman who is succeeding and inspiring others in one way or another. We'll dive into her story, her successes, failures, and the lessons she has learned along the way, all with the goal of inspiring you to listen to that inner voice who keeps reminding you that there is something you want to take action on. You are so much more capable and powerful than you give yourself credit for. Inside of you is a woman on fire. Let's let her out and see what happens. Here we go. Welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host. And this week, we are speaking to a woman whose background is near and dear to my heart. We are speaking to a woman who works within the field of Jungian psychology, and it is such an incredible interview. This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Debi Maldonado, and we were talking all about how our thoughts shape our reality. Essentially, how the concept of identity that we have and the person that we believe ourselves to be actually limits us in terms of the goals that we might set and the outcomes that we might be able to achieve. I hope that has piqued your interest because this was such an incredibly powerful interview. And I hope by listening to this interview, you walk away with an absolute belief, or even just the beginnings of a belief, of the incredible power and the incredible ability that and opportunity that lies within you. You absolutely are bigger and bolder and more amazing than you give yourself credit for. And I hope this interview convinces you of that and gives you some ways that you can move forward into that bigger, bolder, more amazing version of yourself. Debi, I am so excited that you were able to join us today. I know a little bit about your background, and I think this is going to be awesome.
Well, I am so glad to spend some time with you, April.
And it's always fun when I get to speak with a fellow psychologist or a person with a deep background in psychology, because I know we're going to go down some really fun rabbit holes with your interview, and I know it's going to be really valuable for the folks who are listening to this. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
My husband's background is in psychology. I have some background in it. I'm not a psychologist. I actually was trained as a hypnotherapist, and I thought that was all that what personal development was until I met my husband, who has a PhD in psychology, and he brought in a whole new realm of information that I know, like as you as a psychologist knows, that there's a lot of information that is kept in the ivory towers of academia and not out into the main world. And just that's our mission, is to make it more accessible to people.
I love this already. All right. I love this already. Let's start at the right place. Help us get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background. You're already giving us some really great nuggets, but help us get to know you a little bit better.
Well, I started out in my personal development journey really just looking for love. In my early 20s, all my friends got married. I was wondering, how am I going to find the love of my life? And my friend gave me the book, You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And that was the first time I heard that my thoughts create my life. And before that, I thought it was just up to God. And when he bestows a husband on me, it'll be fine. And it just opened up this whole new realm for me. And I just read tons of books. And I was in my early 30s and still haven't found the right person, and kept reading and kept learning. And I even got engaged in my mid 30s. And that obviously didn't work out. And then at the same time, I started started having me ask these deep questions of, what is my life about? What is my purpose? What's, as a woman, like, do I have to get married? Why is it such a negative thing if you're single at 40? And, just asking all those questions. And then all of a sudden, I got laid off from my corporate job, and a friend of mine was a coach, and she said, why don't you try like hypnotherapy? Why don't you become a hypnotherapist? And so I love working with the mind and understanding, like, thoughts create your life. And so I trained as a hypnotherapist, and I did that for about a year. And then I met my husband to be, Rob, and he opened me up to this whole other realm of psychology that I had not seen before. A lot of personal development is, kind of the basics. I mean, if you think about it, everything you hear pretty much sounds the same. And he introduced me to Jungian psychology and this other part of our mind that we're unconscious of, that I really saw in hypnotherapy as just like a program to change. And he was saying the unconscious is really very creative, and it's showing us dreams, and it's showing us, giving us direction, and it's a more of an active, dynamic part of ourselves than I realized. And so he took me down this rabbit hole of the individuation process and understanding how it works. And I said, can we teach this to, I was helping single people after I met him find love. And so he started teaching with me. And then eventually I took him away from his psychology work, and he ended up working and doing personal development training with me. And we coaches in the Jungian coaching model. And now we work together, and it's just been an incredible journey of transformation for myself, but also just witnessing women. That's who we focus on, and that's why I love being on your show, is really having women feel empowered, that there's nothing wrong with them, that if we just learn to use our minds, we can really create anything we want in our life. And it's not always about healing the past. It's about realizing who we really are.
Oh my goodness, we're going to have so much fun. This is awesome. I'm really excited. One place that I would love to start is, it's maybe not where I thought I was going to start, but I'd love to start with the concept of personal development, because it's getting more and more press these days. It's becoming more common, I think, that people sort of go down that type of path. But sometimes I think that there's this, I don't even know if I want to call it a stigma, because I'm not sure if it's that strong, but there's this belief that work is kind of frivolous, or it's not that important, or there's nothing wrong with me. Why should I need anything in the realm of personal development? I feel very differently than that, but I would love to hear your thoughts around the importance of that area and what the average person can get out of going down a path of personal development.
Well, I think it has a stigma because most of personal development was developed by therapists, and in the therapy medical model, which is about something's wrong with you and you got to fix it. And if you don't do, is more of a kind of, you're coming from a deficit and that you have to improve yourself. Where I see personal development as where you're already normal. It's really for functioning people. I mean, if you have a serious mental illness, you should go to a therapist. But the average person, we really want to have us go to our potential and how to understand our minds and how it works. Our experience in life, every experience in life is internal. A lot of people think it's an external experience. We're having, a marriage and money and jobs and careers and things we do and enjoyment in life. But we don't realize that all of that is an internal experience. It's not an external. It feels external, like we are doing these things. We're having people come into our life, but it's all processed, like as you talked about earlier, through our brain when we were talking earlier. And our brain is actually, through the five senses, is basically creating our experience in life. And if we don't realize that it's in us, that out there is just a reflection of what our mind is basically processing what's happening out there, versus out there is giving us something. And I think that a lot of people, if they understand that it's an internal experience, then they can say, okay, if I want a better life, if I want to have more happiness in my life, I have to see what this internal experience is and how do I work with it to have a better internal experience, and then the external will change.
That is exactly where I would love to go with this. Before we get there, though, can you give us a little grounding in, you mentioned a couple of things. So you mentioned your background in hypnotherapy. You mentioned, your husband and him introducing you to, Jungian psychology. Can you give us a background in those two fields and help us understand them better? Because I think both areas are areas that either, maybe people have sort of a working definition as to what they are, but probably not a true accurate understanding.
Sure. Well, hypnotherapy is kind of they call it the blue collar therapy because you don't need a degree in psychology to do it. And or you can be a psychologist and practice it. But it's really about putting people in a relaxed state, in a hypnotic state, which is not really that magical, but it's kind of a ritual. And working with the they call it the subconscious in hypnotherapy, and it's a lot of based on Freudian, which Freud was an atheist, so he believed that we're just our mind is just a program, and there's no like spiritual element or potential in us, that we're just kind of like suppressing things. And a lot of hypnotherapy is about rewiring and rethinking, changing your thoughts to positive. And there's nothing wrong with that. They really helped me kind of get my mind feeling more positive, feeling more confident in myself. Really great tools. And what it does is it builds up the ego, which is, it's fine. I think people need a strong ego in life, and their personality, and to feel good about themselves. But Jungian psychology actually goes to the next level. There's like another level to the unconscious, which is what he called the collective, which is like this unlimited universal self. And it's where we have these experiences of, like, when we dream at night and we have these things show up that we've never had a personal experience with. Where did that come from? And he believed that our consciousness, our mind, is more than just our body, that we have this extension, that we're connected to everything, and that we have access to like a universal information to live our life. And so when I found hypnotherapy, it got me to a certain point. I always say it gets you to base camp, and then that Jungian psychology gets you to the summit. Because if you really want to really grow, hypnotherapy helps you have a little better life and feel really more confident in yourself. But Jungian psychology actually makes you become a new person, which is like almost like letting go of your old identity and actually stepping into something completely new and having a new experience.
Interesting. So that's a very different view of the subconscious than a lot of other fields of psychology and a lot of other fields outside of psychology, but that still work in the personal development space, would view it. Can you elaborate on that a bit more? I mean, you mentioned the collective unconscious, which is so interesting. From the bit that I've studied about it, it's so interesting that, we all have sort of a working, shared bit of knowledge, or you can describe it much more eloquently than I can. I'm wondering if you'll elaborate a little bit there, because I think that's really going to set us up nicely for helping people understand, ultimately, like I said, where I'd love to go around how your thoughts do create your reality.
Well, the collective unconscious is basically, it's like if everyone who studies like consciousness, and we hear like in Eastern philosophy that there's a oneness to everything, like we're all connected. Quantum physics is now saying that there's just one mind, one consciousness that connects us all, like us to the trees and the planets and the stars, and there's no separation. Like our mind doesn't end in our brain and in our body. That there's actually this other part of ourselves, like we read other things. And Jung, what he did was he studied all these other cultures, and what he found is that a lot of these different cultures who've never met before had the same rituals, and then they would have similar dreams. And he would study all these dreams of myths, and he started seeing that, well, there must be something else besides our personal history, a container where all this is stored, where we're all tapping into. It's like this well of information. So that's the collective unconscious. And it's almost like we have inspiration to be something else, and we don't know where it comes from, because in our personal experience in our life, we see this kind of, what's possible for us. But then there's this other aspect of us, which we all know what our imagination does, right? We have this imagination that can see us doing new things. And that is really, we're tapping into that transpersonal experience, which is beyond what I know my experience to be. I can imagine myself being something else. And that collective unconscious, or that other part of our mind, is filled with limitless possibilities. It's like there's no limit to what we can be or what we can create. But what we tend to do is just repeat the same patterns that we're programmed and conditioned to see, and we see the world based on that. So I always say, like, it's like a bubble that we're in that's created by our conditioning. And I'm sure you're very versed in conditioning and social conditioning and personal conditioning and how we're trained to see the world and how it is. And we're living in this bubble, and we when we try to make changes in our life, whether to find a relationship or make more money or change, our mind tends to trick us and see that, oh, we can't have that. We're, the same result. We keep having that Groundhog Day experience. And our imagination is actually the key. Visualization and actually seeing ourselves in a new way is actually piercing that bubble and starting to plant the seed in this kind of, your thoughts create your life. Your thoughts are going into this kind of energy of collective unconscious that is pulling that potential into your life. And if we didn't have that, we would only just repeat, and we'd just be animals, just surviving. But we're born with this other consciousness, which is, there's our thoughts that we're aware of, the thinking mind, but then there's the part of us that's watching the thoughts, the witness, and that is really who we really are. It's kind of a back participant, being aware of our life, and it's a constant part of us. And that is actually that deeper self that holds all the power. But if we just focus on our thoughts and just letting them go on autopilot, we're going to repeat our life and have the same results over and over.
There is an interesting example, and elaborate on this. Jump in here and elaborate on this if you have pieces to add to this that I want to throw out there before we move on from where we're at right now, because I think there's an example that I can give that will resonate with folks who are listening to this. You had mentioned that as people approach new situations, we tend to stay inside this bubble, and we tend to get the same outcome, and we tend to, no matter what we're trying, we tend to end up in the same place that we were in before. And there are a number of different writers who talk about this concept in the realm of money is a really easy one to point at because it's tangible, right? It's a number, and it's easy to point at, wow, that number is higher or lower than this other number. And folks who are listening to this, if you think about yourself and you fill in the blank in this sentence, I'm the type of person who makes how much money? Like, how much money do you make? And so you're going to put a number in there. Surprisingly, it's probably going to be about what you make right now. Someone else who is, say, a millionaire who makes $2 million a year, they would put a very different number in that blank than somebody who makes $80,000 a year. And if both of them lost their jobs or whatever it is that they do to generate income, within a pretty short order, they'll both be employed again, making about the same amount of money as they were before, because they are the type of person who makes that amount of money. Isn't that funny how the person who makes $2 million somehow finds a way to make $2 million again? But that doesn't happen to the $80,000 person.
Mm-mm. And I have a good example of that. When I got laid off from my job, within the first year of starting my own business, I actually went to that same income level. I replaced.
Wow.
I tell a lot of my clients that have really good jobs corporate wise, and they're like, "Oh, I'm afraid to leave and start my business." You're going to resonate at least with that minimum, because it's a default. And that's a really great example, because how it works is that we have a personal identity and connection to everything that we have in our life. Like, it's like the I. And so, like you said, I'm the type of person. This persona, which is the ego, does this thing. When I was single, I was just talking to Rob about this earlier. It's like a lot of single people think, I'm the type of person that's always single. So you're going to have those same type of relation. I'm the type of person that gets cheated on all the time. I'm the type of person that people always try to rip off, or that can't hang on to money. I have another great metaphor that talks about this collective, or our potential, is that we are living in this gigantic mansion, but we're limited right now to this little tiny room, not realizing that there's more to our house than that. We're in this tiny room in the corner, maybe in the basement, without any windows, and we're thinking this is all there is, when we're surrounded by this giant mansion that we can move around in and what's possible for us. But we tend to, as human beings, we're conditioned to see in the bubble and stay the same. And when you say your thoughts create your life, they do. But a lot of people, the problem is they don't know how to work with their mind. They don't understand that if their imagination can take them to another place, they can they can change their reality.
Okay. Woo. Okay. So we're there now. All right. We're like squarely there. I feel like I've done the appropriate background. I feel like people have a good grounding. We've got a good working example. We're in a good place. I wanted to make sure that we set those pieces up for people because the conversation we're about to have is so incredibly important. I wanted people to be in the right headspace and understand this well enough that what's coming will really resonate. And also, I'll say too, when I left my corporate job, when I moved into this entrepreneurial world, I made exactly the same amount of money as I did in my last corporate job, minus 3 months because I was on maternity leave. But if you took the revenue that I made that year, averaged it out over, the 9 months that I worked, and then turned that into 12, it was exactly the same amount of money. Isn't that funny?
It is.
Yes.
And I would add something that a lot of women will they'll build up businesses and they'll focus on their gross revenue of their business. And if they really looked at the numbers, they would look at all the money they're spending on advertising and on, fulfillment and coaching. And then if they really looked at the numbers of how much they're really making in income, it probably will match their corporate money. So it may feel like an illusion that they're making even seven figures. I know a lot of women that make big money and then they looked at their numbers and they were like, "Oh my, I'm only making 150,000 a year."
They net the same.
So yeah, and so it really you have to. It could be it could be very tricky how the pattern still happens, and we are so our mind is really powerful. I've seen this happen so many times. So. But we can change it. That's the thing. We have to wake up and change it.
I love it. And so much of it is just, we talked about this concept of identity. I'm the type of person who, and we learn that. We learn who we are through a variety of different situations we find ourselves in, people we interact with, how our lives play out up until this point, wherever we all may find ourselves at. We develop that identity when, in the simplest of terms, it's simple to say it is not easy to implement necessarily. You just have to be a different person, like change that identity, be someone else. And that's where I'd love to take this next. Talk to me a little bit about this concept of our thoughts shaping our reality.
Well, it really is. If you think about our experience, again, our internal experience, our mind is constantly narrating our life. So if it's narrating that I'm not making enough, I'll never make, I'm always in debt. Susie could be successful, but I can't. No matter what I do, it doesn't work. That story basically gets played out externally. And it's not like this magical like law of attraction, like, ooh, the thought goes out there and it's like has energy to it and it attracts things out there and pulls them in. It's actually it actually shapes what you're seeing. So the internal dialogue, the internal narrative will shape what you see. And they've done studies with this where people what they perceive, perception studies. And if you here's a great example. I'm sure you know about this experiment where they brought people in and they had one line that was short and one line that was obviously longer. And everyone else in the group was, there was like one subject in there and everyone else was kind of placed in there. And all the other people agreed that the shorter line was the long line. And the one person, the subject in there, because of social pressure, started to believe and see the other line, the wrong line being shorter or longer, whatever it was. And it was just like their mind actually started to see something differently. And so imagine that in our life, that if our mind is a story is narrating our perception, we're not going to be able to see or perceive opportunities. We're going to live out and unconsciously do behaviors that support that story. and it just kind of becomes our reality.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the ongoing nature of our brain and our mind narrating our experience. I don't think people realize how constant this is. It's a constant thing. The interactions you're having with other people, the emails you're getting, notifications on your phone, you're in traffic, your boss, your kids, you're having your mind is narrating these experiences, and it literally is shaping how you're perceiving those events to be playing out, and then in turn how they feel to you, and what your own personal experience is. An event could be completely benign, but you might not interpret it that way because of this inner monologue and this narration that's happening. You may give it a totally different value than somebody else would. Same exact situation.
It's all neutral. Out there is neutral. And our mind, I would talk about our backstory. We all have this backstory, what we've been through, who we are, what we're capable of, what we're capable of earning, what kind of relationships we can have, and how much we value ourselves and this personality that we're trying to uphold. And then we tend to look at a relationship, and then our own personal value is dictated by that interaction. And this is a concept of Jung. Might be taken a little further, which not a lot of people talk about, but it's called the shadow. So when not beyond our thinking, we pick on a personality trait that we feel will be pleasing to others and will fit in with society. So let's use money as an example. If you were brought up that it's not good to have a lot of money, rich people are bad, or that you have to work hard to get money, and your personality is this generous, nice person, and you have this persona of I'm caring and nurturing, and a lot of people that do service like coaching and entrepreneurial work with helping others, they have that persona that they want to change the world and they want to be good people. And then there's a conflict because when they go out and they try to ask for money in their business, the shadow is this greedy, someone who's all in it for the money, is coming up for them. And so they're trying to push that away and trying to uphold this persona that they're good. And then they're kind of caught in this, you can't ask for a lot of money, you lower your prices. And then the reality out there will reflect that. People aren't buying from me. I'm not making enough money. And then what will happen is that they'll get feedback from people, that they'll perceive the feedback from people that they're saying no is that, oh, I'm too expensive or I'm too greedy. And that's that internal dialogue of, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person that's, trying to get money out of people. So I'm going to lower my prices and I'm going to sacrifice myself to uphold this persona. And again, it's a trap, and it's created by the thoughts, but it's that the person we don't want to be is pushed into what Jung called the shadow, and we kind of push it away, and it limits us, because if we can't be greedy or all those things, it's in conflict with what our desires are. And so get caught in that trap. And so when we work with people on the shadow, we always say, who is the most irritating person that you know? And they're like, oh, that girl that she's always trying to sell me stuff. She's that coach her prices are too high, and she's always bragging about how successful she is, and she's always, she's trying to sell me. And well, what is it about that person? Well, she's greedy and she has enough already, and she's taking advantage of people. And then all that comes up. And then when they try to start their business and they try to make money for themselves, they're rejecting that. And so they don't realize that because they judge that person, I don't want to be that, they're pushing away that potential. And it's all a judgment based on the story from the past of how they were raised and what it means to have money and what it means to be successful. So that's another level to looking at how your thoughts create your life.
Well, it's so complicated because you look at that person, right? Let's keep going with the example you said. There's this woman who, sees another woman who makes more, and so she doesn't want to be like her and all of that. If you walked down the street and you saw $1,000 in the middle of a completely empty parking lot, there's no one around, there's no possible way you're going to find, If you saw $1,000 on the street, you would pick it up. You're not a bad, just because you now own $1,000 more, you're not a bad person for it. And most people would agree that being able to comfortably pay your bills and not have to worry is something that would be a good thing. Yet there's this cross of this shadow that you're talking about where that's leading us to not want, in some way, not want the thing that would still be a good, like it would feel good to have it. A similar situation is, I know a lot of women are listening to me. And by the way, I want you to file that away into ask for a raise next time you're talking to your boss, like ask for a raise. And listen to V. Spratby's interview. I don't know the number of it, but just go to my website and Google Bratby. She's a negotiation expert. She'll help you do it. But the other thing example that I want to give is a lot of women that I see, and I'm going to raise my hand because I was so this woman. I'm super her. So we'll just say me. I'm just going to say I. I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I used to carry around an identity that I was the person, and it made me a good person. I was the person who sacrificed myself for other people. I made sure other people's needs were met at the expense of my own. Look at me, how much I can sacrifice. Look at me, how much I can give. It made me feel like I was a bigger, better person because I was doing things for other people. Now, I would get frustrated when I would see other women who also were taking care of their families and taking care of everything around them and seemed to do it with such ease. It's because that identity that I had was one of a martyr. I'm going to completely sacrifice myself for someone else. And it's frustrating to me that somebody else has something that I want. I would love to have ease, but yet I feel like that would make me a bad person. There's this push and pull with this shadow and our identity that is so complicated sometimes.
Well, let me use that example because a lot of people think the shadow is a bad thing. The martyr, if your persona is a martyr, the opposite is the shadow.
Yeah, that woman with ease.
The woman is the woman that doesn't feel obligated all the time.
Right. Look at her going to the gym and dropping her kids off at childcare. Look at her going to happy hour with her girlfriends. Yeah.
And it's and I think a lot of people, when they hear shadow work, they think, oh, it's all the dark parts of ourselves. I want to clear. It's like, no, most of what's in our shadow is our brilliance and our potential.
I love it. Keep going. I love it.
And the persona that we've learned to live, and some people call it the ego, but the persona is really the external, like we call it the psychological clothing that we wear to, put on Facebook and social media, that who we are and relationships, and it's that personality. But that ego is really the internal dialogue, but the persona is the external, kind of like the face or mask that we wear. And that mask really limits us. It's almost like we like, for me, here's a great example. I'm raising my hand too, is I had this example that you can't be a spiritual giving person and wanting to help people and ask for money. And so I always had that conflict, and I worked on it. And I had this woman ask me one time, she said, oh, can I do your coach training program? But I can't pay for you. What if you give it to me for free, and then I'll pay you when I start making money? And I said to her really nicely, no, I can't. And of course I felt a little guilt, like saying no to this person who wants to learn this. But I said, no, I can't. That's not fair to everyone else. And if you don't pay for coaching now, how are you going to get other people to buy your coaching? Like, I was trying to help her, and I was very kind. And she wrote back, she goes, oh, I'm sorry, I confused you with a humanitarian. I thought you were a spiritual person. And I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, she's my shadow. Great. I'm glad she did that. It really showed like what we're really afraid of, what people think of us. And it was just like when people like do that to us or call us those names, it triggers us. It's like, oh, this is what's been holding me back. So you want to welcome those experiences and not think, oh, that woman is not telling me what I want to hear. You go, no, this is great. Thank you so much for reflecting my mind and showing me my deeper fears about that. And then I was able to, our business kept growing that year because I had to work through that inner barrier and that inner dialogue of I can't have both. And any external conflict that we're having in our business and our life is reflecting an internal conflict. And it's always that persona, the identity, who we think we are, the personality, and our shadow, which is the unconscious part that we don't want to come out. That other part of ourselves, the greedy, the selfish, all the things that our ego thinks is negative, but actually being a little selfish or being a little having more discipline or saying no to people, it actually helps them. I think a lot of people that are people pleasers, they don't realize that they're actually hurting people when you're pleasing them because you're being fake. You're not being real. You're not helping them, and then you're resenting them for taking advantage. So it doesn't help anyone for you to please. So the pleasing, you could drop that. It's not helping anyone. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, thank God. Like I feel better about not pleasing because I know I'm hurting people.
Absolutely.
Hurting yourself and hurting them. You're not being authentic. And it's not, it's all that energy that you push into your shadow to uphold this surface personality that is limiting you, that's seeing the same story replay over and over. If you bring the shadow in and integrate it, what happens is that this new you starts to form and you stop being driven by that conditioning of I can't be that way because it's what I've been told is good and right. You start to have more choice in your life. Do I want to charge, a lot of money for that out of choice? Yeah, I'll do that. Or do I want to feel just an unconscious compulsion to charge lower because that's what I've been conditioned to be? And it's really, there's no right or wrong. It's really just about that personal freedom to make a choice, that it's coming from a free choice, not a conditioned response.
Yes. And so, okay, so let's just state a fact here, the absolute fact that everyone listening to this, there is so much more potential inside of you. There is such a bigger, more vibrant, more capable person inside of you than you're giving yourself credit for. How do we step into that? How do we lose or start to bring those two things together, the shadow and this persona that we're talking about? How do we start to get okay with some of those things that might be aspects that we've pushed away for so long? Like, how do we step into that bigger, better person?
Well, first of all, we have to know that those labels that we give ourselves, selfish, kind, nice, giving, abundant, struggling with financially poor, all those things, they're not really who we are. And our mind makes a story up about it, and they're not really real. Like, thought, it doesn't have like weight to it. Like it's just a thought. It's not like it's not a judgment, a permanent state. Our mind has millions of thoughts running through every day. So for us to identify and use that as a label and make it so like it's so terrible if someone thinks I'm a bad person, like the whole world is going to abandon me if Jane doesn't like me anymore. We have that kind of fear of being like abandoned and pushed out of our circles and our tribe. But to see that those are just judgments, and a lot of what we judge about ourselves is internal. Like people don't think that of us. It's more of our assumption. And to be okay with like taking a little spoonful of what we're afraid of. So for me, being selfish, or for someone to look at me as being greedy, like not be afraid of stepping into that, like to ask for the salary you want, or the money you want in your own business, or negotiating with staff or negotiating with your boss, whether you're an entrepreneur or in the corporate world. Like not being afraid of just asking for what you want and being willing to step out of that old fear of what they're going to think of me. That's where really the freedom starts. And it's by examining that feeling of what if they thought I was greedy. And what we tell people to do is there's a feeling attached to that. There's a feeling attached to greed, or to be selfish, or a bad person, or if someone leaves, like doesn't like us. And we just kind of sit with the feeling. We're not moving it away. We're not pushing it away. We're not agreeing with it. We're just sitting back, and we're using that witness mind and just watching the story unfold. We're not trying to change it right now. We're just kind of looking at it. And what you're going to see is your mind in 3D. You're going to see your mind. And it's like, in Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. I know I'm dating myself with that movie, but
no way. I saw it too. And I use that reference all the time. So go for it.
saw the code, he saw the code, and that's what you're doing. You're pulling yourself back and you're becoming the witness to this conditioned thinking and feeling, and you're just watching your mind and just seeing how it's been really limiting your life. And if you give yourself that space, what happens is just watching it will start to transform it. It's like you're bringing in another, like I say, that collective energy that's this higher self, it to be a better word, coming in, that's our potential, is like looking at this programming and that the spinning of the mind. And the way we're conditioned is through that feeling. It's to avoid that feeling, is to push it away. So we create a persona to avoid that feeling. So if we sit with it, it's like facing the dragon. It's like slaying the dragon almost. You're kind of just letting it be there without trying to fix it, without trying to heal it, without trying to make it better. And you're just going, oh, it's just sensation in my body. It's just a feeling arising. It's a sensation. And it's a story that's not true. And it's like you start to see that it's not really real. And that's where your mind just goes, oh. And if you're not being the witness, you're really caught up in the story, you're caught up in the emotion, and you're just kind of doing what you've always done. So that is a really quick, we call it meta consciousness, which means above consciousness or above the thinking, that you take a step back and you watch. And that actually creates more space for you to see another possibility and not get caught up in the trap. Another metaphor would be if your thoughts are like a rushing river, and what we do is we tend to jump in with the thought and get dragged away. And what we're doing is we're just standing on the bank of that river and watching those thoughts go by, watching the emotion just get triggered, and we're not doing anything. We're just watching it. And it loses its power when we don't get sucked into it. And so it's a discipline of mind. It's one of the techniques that we teach that helps people get back in control of their mind. And that's where you have choice. When you're sucked down the river, the past thinking, the past emotional conditioning is just taking you away and repeating the old pattern.
Amazing. Amazing. I don't know who this quote originated with or whatever, and I'm probably not quoting it perfectly either, but the concept of you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts that isn't you. That they're just thoughts. They're just thoughts that your brain is having. And you absolutely can decide to have different thoughts. And the more you have those different thoughts, the more comfortable you become with them. And so for folks who are listening to this, I would encourage you to think through a couple of questions. So what are the reoccurring limiting thoughts that you're having? And what does the opposite one look like or feel like? Or the one that's not limiting? Maybe it's not quite opposite, but the one that's not limiting. And then two, you, Debbie, you hit on it a couple of moments ago. How would your behavior or your concept of who you are, how would that differ from the way that you see it today if you knew that no one else would judge you? If no one else was going to judge you and they weren't going to pay any attention to any of it and you could be and do anything, what would you do? And who would you be? And that gets powerful because that gets to really deep underlying desires that you have that you're not letting yourself do simply because of this perception of what other people might think and the weight and importance that you're putting on, again, just thoughts that someone else might be having.
Excellent. And I would also add that the thoughts that you have that you're aware of are just the tip of the iceberg. It's what's the unconscious thoughts, the unconscious stories that you're not even aware of that's running are actually more impactful. And Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll think it's fate.
Oh, man.
So it's like becoming aware not only of your the thoughts you can hear, but then that exercise I just give you, the more unconscious stories are just going to start to bubble up that you didn't even know were connected. And so you're just bringing more awareness of what's underneath the surface, and that's what's going to really create change. And I also want to say that this isn't hard work. We're designed to be our true potential. There's a reason why people are listening to your podcast and our podcast. It's because they know that there's more, and they don't know how, but they know there's more. And that's where I want people to have faith in that you have an innate ability that you were born with to live beyond your personality, to live your fullest potential. It's in you. There's no magic. It's not given to just certain people. And that's why we want to do personal development. This is why we seek answers, because it's a part of us is actually wanting us to do this. It's compelling us to do it. And the ego is just kind of like the opposing force saying, no, let's just keep the same pattern. And it's in that friction of that divine part of us that wants to have it all, and the ego pushing back, that actually creates the fire for our transformation. So we need both, but we're really built for that. So just feel like it's your destiny, instead of I got to do it right, or I'm never going to have what I want.
My heart just exploded when I heard you say that. And it's so true. It is so true that this is just some of the most important work that you're ever going to do is on yourself. And the most important gift that you'll ever give yourself is allowing yourself to be audacious enough to recognize what your true potential actually is. And you don't have to listen to, if the people around you aren't there yet and they're not doing it, they may look at you as what you're doing is very strange, or what you're doing is different than what they're doing. And so there's judgment and whatever that comes from that. Be audacious and go against the grain enough. It's just the most important thing that you can do for yourself is to believe in your own potential and have the audacity to go after it.
Yeah, excellent. And it is uncomfortable because it's all unknown. So you're designed to stay the same. So when you're feeling uncomfortable, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
Heard by other people, it's like the part of your mind is going, see the patterns right here. Like the world is showing you your unconscious mind. And if you see everything as a reflection of your mind, every irritable person that comes in, every conflict that shows up, it's there to help you free yourself and become more aware. And then life becomes more of it's like a kind of a treasure hunt versus oh my God, I got to survive and tread water and keep paying the bills. It becomes very magical.
Oh, so wonderful. Okay, I could talk to you for probably 3 hours today, so we could really make this go off the rails. But what I will say is I guarantee that the folks who are listening to this are going to want to know more, because I want to keep asking you questions. And I know that there are people who are in their cars and have me in their earbuds right now who are like, no, ask her another question. So when people want to learn more about the work that you're doing and how they might be able to work with you, where can they find you?
Well, our website is debianddrrob.com, but we have, if they want to go directly to, we have a free video series it's just like 3 videos on how to create your life. And we talk about the shadow and we take you through a process. It's herhiddenpower.com. That might be easier to remember, herhiddenpower.com. And it's about finding that power within you that you can't see yourself, and how to start creating. And so we did this video series, and some of our clients who worked with us for years said they were taking feverish notes by, this that actually takes you step by step through how to make a change in your life.
Wonderful. This was so great. Like I said, I could just keep going for
so much fun
hours today. I so appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate you sharing this amazing background and knowledge with us, and just helping to breathe life into the fact that people are so much bigger than they give themselves credit for. And that, this is just a big permission slip for people to be audacious and go after it, because you absolutely have more in you than you could ever believe that you do. So I so appreciate you being here today.
And I appreciate you and the work you do. And let's keep waking up the world.
Heck yeah. Well, there you have it, you guys. I hope you loved that interview with Debi Maldonado. As always, I have a few things that I want to urge you to think about, and one thing actually that I want to urge you to do as a result of this interview. As you could tell, I was extremely passionate and so excited about everything that Debi was saying, because I absolutely believe, and I say it in my intro, my canned intro that you listen to every single week when I release a podcast. You are such a bigger badass and so much more capable and in control than you give yourself credit for. And because of that, we all can be so much more than we think we can. our opportunity in front of us and our potential as human beings is so much bigger than we give ourselves credit for. And this interview was so in line with that and was so wonderful and refreshing to hear. All right, the few things that I want to touch on. Number one, you are not your thoughts. That's such an important concept to really take to heart. And it can be a really hard one to let it sink in because our thoughts are loud and they're continuous and we're really used to them happening and it can be really difficult to sort of divorce ourselves from them or separate ourselves from them and really just observe them in the way that Debi was talking about. It takes practice, but it is totally possible to do. And once you can do that, and Debi gave a great example and a great set of tips about how you can go down this path. Once you're able to do that, you truly do see that your thoughts are just sort of things that happen. And when you get wrapped up in them, that's when we start to have problems. But if you can really look at them for what they are, they're just a thought. It doesn't make them true. It doesn't make them who you are. But when you can sort of separate yourself from them and observe them as just a thing that's happening in your brain, you really can start to see that the true path here is to just think a different thought, be a different person. And that's kind of where the second piece is leading, or the second thing that I want you to take away from this interview. Can you tell yourself a different story? So especially around those thoughts and those beliefs that limit you in some way, we used, money as an example because that's so easy. It's easy to say $80,000 is less than $2 million, right? You believing that you are the type of person who makes $80,000 or $180,000. That right there is a limiting thought. I truly believe that we should all be, and money is just one example, we should all be constantly trying to push that upper limit of what our identity is telling us that we are. I am no longer, and I've seen this work wonders for people, I am no longer the type of person who makes $80,000. I'm the type of person who makes $280,000. How can you push that upper limit higher so that you can expand as a person and step into more of that potential that absolutely is there for you? Your identity is what is holding you back. Check it. Your ego will be the biggest thing that will hold you back. Check your ego at the door and try to move past it. And the last thing that I want to reiterate, I mentioned this in the interview, but I want you to sit down at one point this week. Actually do this. Don't be like, yeah, April. Okay, cool. Moving through traffic. La, la, la. Next podcast when this one's over. I want you to actually sit down and do this. Get a piece of paper, sit on your computer, on your phone, wherever you like to write, and write down what it is that you would do or who it is that you would be if you knew, if you were absolutely certain that no one was going to judge you for it. Who would you be or what would you do? I can be completely certain and honest with you that I would have done the work that I'm about to do, the work that I'm stepping into now. I would have done it so long ago. Other people's opinions and the judgments that I think, I don't know, but that I think that other people might have, those judgments are a big part of what held me back. Don't let that happen to you. What would you do and who would you be if you knew that no one else was going to judge you for it? Please know that I'm sitting over here behind this microphone cheering you on. The judgment I have of you is that you are so much bigger than you think you are. You have so much more potential than you are giving yourself credit for. And if you need somebody to convince you of that, DM me. I am happy to be that person. I am happy to breathe life into some of those goals and that bigger person that you are striving to be. That person's in there. I know that they are because they're in there for every single one of us. All right, you guys, I really hope you enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for listening this week. So many cool things coming up. Can't wait. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.